Baseball has always been more than a game. It is a mirror of America, a place where grit, rebellion, and genius collide under the summer sun. And in the late 1970s, when the Oakland Athletics had fallen into despair, a man appeared who was as combustible as he was brilliant. His name was Billy Martin, and with him came a storm. Martin was not just another manager. He was a fighter, a survivor of the Bronx Zoo chaos in New York, a man cast out by the Yankees but too proud and too restless to fade into the shadows. When he arrived in Oakland, he carried with him a radical vision of how baseball could be played, a style that abandoned patience and calculation for fury, speed, and relentless attack. They called it Billyball. To some, it was madness. To others, it was salvation. It turned a lifeless franchise into a spectacle of fire and danger, where every inning felt like a street fight and every base stolen was a declaration of war. This is the story of Billyball, the crazy, reckless, unforgettable strategy that shook Major League Baseball and gave Oakland back its heartbeat. Billy Martin was a man who seemed to carry chaos in his wake. Wherever he went, drama followed. But beneath the fistfights, the fiery press conferences, and the feuds with owners and players, there was a tactical mind that saw the game differently. He was a student of risk, a believer that pressure could break even the strongest opponent, and in Oakland, he finally found the canvas to paint his masterpiece. The Athletics of the late 1970s were not a powerhouse. The dynasty that had once dominated the early part of the decade was long gone. Attendance at the Coliseum had plummeted. Fans stayed home. The roster lacked stars. It was a franchise adrift. Martin saw not despair, but opportunity. He didn't need a team of sluggers to execute his plan. He needed fighters. He needed men willing to play with reckless abandon, to turn every game into a test of nerves. That was the essence of Billyball. The heart of Billyball was aggression. Most managers of the era believed in waiting for the big hit, in playing station-to-station baseball, in letting power bats carry the load. Martin tore that philosophy apart. To him, every pitch was an opportunity to disrupt. If a pitcher was even slightly slow to the plate, he sent his runners. If the infield shaded too deep, he called for a bunt. If the defense relaxed for a moment, he made them pay. It was baseball as combat, played at a pace that rattled opponents and thrilled spectators. The Athletics became a whirlwind, running wild on the bases, charging down bunts and forcing errors. Even when they failed, the chaos itself served a purpose. Opponents never had time to breathe. Fans in Oakland, long starved for excitement, were electrified. Suddenly the Coliseum roared again. They watched as Rickey Henderson, young and blazing fast, embodied everything Martin wanted. Henderson would steal bases with a kind of audacity that defied logic, daring pitchers to stop him and daring catchers to throw him out. He became the icon of Billyball, the perfect weapon for Martin's relentless pressure. But it wasn't just Henderson. Every man on the roster was expected to embrace the chaos. They were drilled to run, to bunt, to slide, to scrap for every inch. There was no waiting for the three-run homer. There was only the constant heartbeat of attack. The strategy was not without cost. The physical demands were brutal. Players found themselves exhausted, bodies pushed to the limit, injuries mounted. Yet the reward was undeniable. In 1980, the A's surged beyond expectation. By 1981, they shocked the baseball world, sweeping the Kansas City Royals in the Division Series and advancing to the American League Championship Series. Though they would fall to the New York Yankees, the run had already rewritten the story of Oakland baseball. The Athletics were no longer an afterthought. They were a force of disruption, and Billyball was the reason why. To truly understand the radical nature of Billyball, one must look at the baseball climate of the time. The late 1970s and early 1980s were dominated by power. Teams built lineups around sluggers who could clear the fences, The long ball was the currency of victory, and patience at the plate was celebrated as a virtue. Martin spat on this orthodoxy. He embraced a style more akin to the street games of his youth, where hustle mattered more than power, where guile beat muscle. It was almost a throwback to an older era of baseball, but amplified with modern ferocity. Billyball was not nostalgic. It was revolutionary. Opponents hated facing it. Pitchers were rattled by constant base runners dancing off the bags, threatening to steal at any moment. Infielders were pressured into errors by bunts and hit-and-runs. Outfielders were tested by daring first-to-third runs. The entire rhythm of the game was thrown off. Martin understood something psychological. Baseball is as much a battle of minds as of bodies. By keeping opponents perpetually off balance, he seized control of the emotional flow of the contest. Even when the A's lacked superior talent, they could win by sheer disruption. The media, ever hungry for drama, ate it up. Headlines screamed about the mad genius of Billy Martin. The Coliseum, once a mausoleum of empty seats, began to buzz with life again. Billyball was entertainment as much as sport. Fans didn't just watch games, they experienced them. Every inning promised surprise. Every at-bat carried suspense. The style brought baseball back to Oakland's heart, reuniting the city with a team it had abandoned. Yet, as with all things Martin touched, there was a darker side. His intensity was not sustainable. The pressure he applied to his players was relentless. He demanded not only effort, but obsession. Some thrived under it, others broke. The toll of constant running, bunting, sliding, and aggressive play wore down bodies. Pitchers were asked to throw complete games in an era already pushing the limits of endurance. Martin believed in riding his starters hard, often ignoring the long-term costs. Critics accused him of burning out arms, of shortening careers. The accusations were not unfounded. The physical wreckage of Billyball was real. But perhaps that was always part of the deal with Martin. He lived fast, he fought hard, and he rarely looked beyond the next battle. In Oakland, he created not a dynasty, but a moment, a flash of brilliance that seared itself into memory. Billyball was never meant to last decades. It was meant to ignite, to blaze, and to leave behind a legend. In the years that followed, the echoes of Billyball did not fade. Other managers began to adopt elements of its philosophy. The value of speed and pressure returned to the forefront. The stolen base, once seen as secondary to the home run, became a weapon again. Teams realized that chaos could win as effectively as power. In many ways, Martin was ahead of his time, foreshadowing later eras where balance between power and speed defined champions. He showed that baseball could be played not only with numbers and patience, but with daring and audacity. For the city of Oakland, Billyball was more than just wins and losses. It was identity. It was rebellion. In a city often overshadowed by San Francisco, the A's under Martin embodied the underdog spirit, the willingness to fight against the odds. Fans saw in Billyball a reflection of their own struggles and defiance. It wasn't always clean, it wasn't always pretty, but it was theirs, and it was unforgettable. As the seasons passed, Martin's time in Oakland came to an end. The inevitable clashes with management, the exhaustion of his players, and the toll of his own demons brought the chapter to a close. Yet when people speak of the A's, when they remember the early 1980s, they speak with fire in their eyes about Billyball. It wasn't just baseball. It was a movement, a statement, a living embodiment of risk and passion. That is why, decades later, the legend endures. And so the story of Billyball is not just about wins or losses, not just about strategy or tactics. It is about the human hunger for life at full speed. It is about a manager who refused to bow to convention, who would rather burn bright and fast than fade quietly. It is about a city that found its voice again through chaos and courage. Billyball may have lasted only a few fleeting years, but its spirit continues to inspire anyone who believes that daring can overcome doubt, and that sometimes Madness is just another word for genius. Billy Martin left Oakland the way he had lived his entire career, in a storm of brilliance and controversy. Billyball was not perfect, and it was not built to last. It demanded too much, burned too bright, and consumed everything in its path. But in those brief years, it gave baseball something it desperately needed. It gave it fire. It gave it unpredictability. It gave fans a reason to believe again. The Athletics of 1980 and 1981 were not supposed to matter, yet under Martin, they mattered more than most. They captured imagination. They proved that courage and audacity could resurrect even a broken franchise. And though the injuries, the exhaustion, and the feuds eventually undid the magic, the memory remains. Today, when people speak of Oakland baseball, when they speak of Rickey Henderson's daring steals or the roar of the Coliseum crowds, they speak of Billyball. They speak of a time when baseball felt like a revolution, when every game was a gamble, and when one man's refusal to play safe changed the way America remembered its pastime. Billy Martin's name may fade with time, but Billyball will always burn in baseball's soul.